Look, you wake up early, maybe before the sun's even fully up. You check your phone, scroll for a bit, then get ready for work. You spend 8, sometimes 10 hours working, trying to be responsible, trying to do the right thing. At the end of the month, you get paid. And for a moment, it feels good. Like you're making progress. Like things are finally moving forward. But then, the bills hit. Rent, food, transportation, subscriptions you barely remember signing up for. And suddenly that money you worked so hard for, it's almost gone. Now you might be thinking, maybe I just need to budget better. Or maybe I need to earn more. But here's the thing. Even when you try to save, even when you invest a little, it still feels slow, painfully slow. And that's the part no one really talks about. So let me ask you something. What if the reason you feel stuck isn't because you're doing nothing, but because you're doing exactly what everyone else is doing? My name is Demas, and I spend way too much time thinking about money. If you're someone who feels stuck financially, make sure to hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this helps you out. Now look, I don't say that lightly. When I say I think about money a lot, I mean I've spent hours, probably hundreds of hours, breaking down how people earn, spend, save, and invest. Not just from a theoretical perspective, but from real-life situations, real salaries, real expenses, real struggles. And here's what I kept noticing over and over again. People aren't lazy. They're not reckless. They're not even bad with money in the way we often assume. In fact, most people are doing what they've been told their entire lives. Work hard. Save a portion of your income. Stay out of debt. Invest for the long term. That's the formula, right? Now you might be thinking, okay, so what's the problem? Because on paper, that advice makes sense. It sounds responsible. It sounds like something that should lead to financial stability over time. But here's what most people don't realize. Following good advice doesn't always lead to good outcomes. And that's where things start to get uncomfortable. Because if you've been doing all the right things, saving a bit, maybe investing here and there, trying to be disciplined, but you still feel like you're not really getting ahead, then the issue isn't your effort. It might be the system you're following. Here's the thing. Most financial advice is designed to be safe, simple, and broadly applicable. It works in theory. It works on averages. But your life is not an average. Your situation is not a textbook example. And when you apply general advice to a very specific financial situation, you can end up stuck. Not because you're failing, but because the strategy itself isn't optimized for where you are right now. And this is where it gets really interesting, because once you start looking at the actual numbers, the real financial data behind the average American, you begin to see a pattern that's hard to ignore. A pattern that explains why so many people feel like they're running in place financially, even when they're doing everything they're supposed to do. Here's what most people believe. If you just save consistently, invest for the long term, avoid debt, and work hard, everything will eventually fall into place. And look, on the surface, that sounds completely reasonable. It's simple. It's clean. It feels like a proven path. But here's the thing. Simple doesn't always mean sufficient. Because if this advice alone was enough, then most people wouldn't feel financially stuck. Now you might be thinking, maybe people just aren't disciplined enough. But that's not entirely true. Plenty of people are disciplined. They budget, they track their expenses, they even invest regularly. And yet, the progress still feels slow, almost invisible. This is where it gets really interesting. The problem isn't that the advice is wrong. The problem is that it ignores something critical: timing and prioritization. Not all financial decisions carry the same weight. And doing the right thing, in the wrong order, can quietly hold you back for years. Now let's step away from opinions for a second and look at the actual numbers. Because here's what most people don't realize. The data tells a very different story. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the median annual income in the U.S. is around $60,000. At first glance, that sounds fine, maybe even comfortable. But here's the thing. That's before taxes. After federal, state, and other deductions, that number drops closer to $45,000, $48,000 take home. Break that down monthly, and you're looking at roughly $3,800. Now, you might be thinking, that's still manageable. But this is where it gets really interesting. According to data from the Federal Reserve, nearly 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, which means, even at that income level, most people aren't building wealth. They're just maintaining survival. So let's take that $3,800 monthly take-home and see where it actually goes. Because here's the thing. Money doesn't disappear randomly. It gets allocated, often automatically, into the same categories every single month. Start with rent. For a lot of people, that's easily $1,500 or more. Add food, groceries, eating out occasionally, another $500. Transportation, gas, insurance, maybe a car payment, that's around $400. Healthcare and insurance, another $300. Utilities, phone bills, streaming subscriptions, let's say $300. And then there's everything else. Small purchases, random expenses, things you didn't plan for, another $400. Now add that up, you're already at around $3,400, which leaves you with about $400. And that's assuming nothing goes wrong. No emergencies, no unexpected bills, no lifestyle upgrades. Now you might be thinking, okay, $400 isn't bad, I can work with that. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. That small gap is supposed to carry your entire financial future. So let's take that $400 and do what everyone says you should do. Invest it, consistently, every single month. Now, here's the thing. If you invest $400 a month at an average return of 7% per year, over 30 years, you end up with roughly $500,000. Sounds impressive, right? But this is where it gets really interesting. That number doesn't exist in a vacuum. Because over 30 years, inflation quietly eats away at your purchasing power. What feels like $500,000 in the future might only feel like $250,000 or $300,000 in today's money. Now you might be thinking, well, that's still something. And you're right, it is. But here's the thing. That result assumes consistency. No missed months. No emergencies forcing you to pause. No major life disruptions. And more importantly, it assumes that $400 is all you can ever invest. Which means your progress is not just slow, it's capped. Now let's add something most people conveniently ignore. Debt. Because here's the thing. While you're investing that $400 a month, there's a good chance you're also carrying some form of debt in the background. Credit cards, personal loans, maybe even financing plans. And according to data from the Federal Reserve, average credit card interest rates are sitting above 20%. Now let's pause for a second and really think about that. You're earning around 7% from investing, but losing 20% on debt. This is where it gets brutally clear. You're not actually moving forward. You're moving in opposite directions at the same time. Now, you might be thinking, but I'm still investing, so at least I'm doing something. Look, imagine trying to fill a bucket with water, but there's a hole at the bottom. Investing is you pouring water in. Debt is the hole draining it out. And unless you fix that hole first, the bucket never fills. So if the math is this obvious, why do people still do it? Why invest while carrying high-interest debt? Why keep spending even when they know it slows them down? Here's the thing. Money decisions aren't just logical. They're deeply psychological. First, there's instant gratification. Spending feels good right now. Investing or paying off debt. That payoff is far in the future. Your brain naturally prioritizes what feels immediate. Then there's loss aversion. People hate the feeling of losing money. So instead of aggressively paying off debt, they hold on to cash for safety, even if that debt is quietly draining them at 20% a year. Now add social comparison. You see people upgrading their lifestyle, traveling, buying nicer things, and even if you're doing okay, it creates pressure to keep up. And finally, risk confusion. Now you might be thinking, isn't investing always better long-term? But here's what most people don't realize. A guaranteed loss feels less scary than an uncertain gain, even when it's mathematically worse. So this is where the real shift happens. Because once you understand the math and the psychology, you start to see something most people completely miss. Here's the thing. Wealth isn't just about how much you earn, save, or invest. It's about the order in which you make your financial decisions. Now, you might be thinking, does the order really matter that much? Yes, more than most people realize. Because doing the right thing in the wrong sequence can slow you down for years. This is where it gets really interesting. Wealthy individuals don't just follow generic advice, they optimize. First, They eliminate guaranteed losses, high-interest debt, unnecessary expenses, inefficiencies. Then they build systems that make saving and investing automatic, not based on motivation but structure. And only after that do they scale their investments aggressively. Look, the average person focuses on doing more. Wealthy people focus on doing things in the right order. So what do you actually do with all of this? Because here's the thing. Understanding the problem is one thing. Fixing it is another. First, get clear on your numbers. Not roughly, not in your head. Write it down. Income, expenses, debt, and most importantly, the interest rates attached to that debt. Second, prioritize eliminating high-interest debt. Anything above 10% is not normal. It's a financial emergency. Treat it like one. Third, build a small emergency fund, not to feel rich, but to stay stable, enough to avoid falling back into debt when life happens. Then, and only then, start investing consistently. Automate it so it doesn't depend on motivation. And finally, increase your income, because there's only so much you can cut, but your earning potential can grow. Here's the thing. Money compounds. But more importantly, your decisions compound. And if you change the order today, you change the outcome tomorrow.